Architectural Builder's Supply is pleased to present you with this recording of the technical question that is listed in the title of this video.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
A Rixson 180 top pivot stud question. Okay, what's the question?
Correct. So I'm trying to remove a door and the stud seems stuck there. Is there a way to take these out, or?
Well, you should be able to use a center punch and tap it out.
Tap it up or tap it
It'll
down?
come out either way, really. Depends on which cap you remove. I mean, I would think you're going to remove them.
You would think you would remove what?
The caps from the top pivot before you can drive the stud out.
Oh, so you can actually punch it up
Or down.
into the hinge.
No,
Well, it's
not a
impossible
hinge.
to punch down.
Well, isn't there a cap that you can unthread?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me add some clarity. This hinge is mortised into a top header.
It's not a hinge, it's a pivot.
I'm sorry.
If it's a 180, I just want to be sure we're talking about a 180.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The pivot is mortised up, not only onto the door, but up into the header. So the only access to the pivot stud is through the bottom, through the leaf that's attached to the door. And so you unscrew that cap, and I mean, logic would say that it would either get pushed up or pulled down. But when you go to install that one, you would push it through both leaves, like both. Yeah, I mean, am I making myself clear a little bit?
Pretty much. Isn't there a pivot cap on the header portion and the door portion?
That's the problem, because it's mortised on the header portion. I can't access that.
Why? Is there trim covering it?
No, like it's mortised the whole thing. Like
No, it's not. It's not in the. So I'm really familiar with the 180. The pivot cap is on what we probably could call the knuckle portion.
Correct.
Not on the 4 3/4, whatever it is.
No, correct. Right. So what I'm saying is, like, not only is the portion that's supposed to be on the door, not only is that mortised, correct, but on top, so on the part of the frame of the doorway, the other half, or the top head of the leaf, is mortised inside that door frame. So there's like no access to push through the pin.
Why is that? Is the top of the knuckle covered somehow?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah. You can remove the bottom cap, and I don't know if you'll be able to coax that pin out.
So all right. So I have to kind of get a little MacGyvery on it, is what you're saying.
No, I didn't say that. These aren't meant to be MacGyvered.
No, I'm saying I have to kind of figure out a way to get some leverage to get that pin to come down.
Yeah. What's at the bottom?
It's not a 374, but it's smaller than the 374.
Yeah, so it's some sort of a typical offset pivot.
Correct.
Shoot.
right? Like
Yeah.
once I release the pin up top, on the bottom, I can just lift the door up and, be on my way.
Yeah. Is there by any chance a shim involved in the bottom pivot that you could temporarily lift the door, pull the shim out?
I don't see one.
Yeah.
I have seen shims underneath, like the metal shims that come in the that come with the pivot, but I don't see
closers.
one on here. What's that?
And typically closers is where you'll have shims. And there's no way to remove the obstruction to get to that top pivot cap?
Oh, wait. No, this door has a closer on it.
Oh, okay. Well, there could be a shim. And if there's a shim, you might be able to lift the door up and pull the shim out and have the door then sink down the small amount that you might be able to then remove the screws of like the underside of the header, the header portion, to have that all drop down that 1/8 of an inch or so that you need to be able to tip that thing out with the top pivot still intact, or the top pivot still sitting, the header portion still sitting on the bottom portion, on the door portion. You might be able to cheat that there, but it would be a mistake.
Okay.
Not a mistake, but having shims, you wouldn't really expect to see them.
Right. So just to kind of overview the information that you've given me, this pivot stud it just sits there and has to be kind of knocked either up or down.
Yeah,
correct?
And the reason it has to be that way is because that 180 is non-handed, and that pivot cap is...
So it's not threaded in any way?
No, the pin is not threaded. It's just pressure fit inside of there.
Ah, okay. All right. Do you guys still sell those pivot studs individually?
Yeah, you can buy those.
Yeah, you can buy. Do you guys carry them?
Sure.
Ah, okay. Do you have a price on them by any chance?
They're not expensive. I think I sold some a month ago. Whatever it is. It's a piece of hardened steel. I don't read. I'd have to look up the part number, but they're not.
Yeah,
much
the
money.
pivot. The pivot is not cheap, so that's why I'm asking. Sometimes parts can be just as expensive as the whole.
Yeah. I see. Like if you built a Chevy Malibu from parts, it'd cost you $100,000. That is not the case with this. That pivot stud was, you and coffee for a couple of friends. That kind of price. It wasn't super expensive.
Oh, okay. I like that. Analogy. Very good. All right. So I guess I'll be calling you back if I need it. If not, thank you very much for the information.
Yeah, of course. Tell me your email and I'll send you a link to the pivot stud.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, so as you heard in the conversation, the client has a Rixson 180 and he can't get the pivot stud out. Well, the pivot stud it comes out quite easily, but what I was trying to drive at was clearly he's got some sort of a obstacle in the field. So this is a 180. The 180 is not handed. And that's important when you're thinking about the hardware. It can be installed as a left-hand version or a right-hand version. You separate those two leaves, that's the pivot stud right there. Okay? It's held in with just like this, like a rubber O-ring, just to keep it in place so it doesn't come out. But you can pull it out easily. And that piece of material there, and he might actually be able to get lucky. I'm not sure if he can see the threaded end down, but you can discover what that thread is to thread something into it to then be able to pull it down through the arm cap. So the bottom line is, what I was driving at with the client is you have a pivot cap on both ends. The part about it being non-handed is important because I don't need to see this to know that there's a pivot cap in both ends because it's non-handed, which means the design has to be symmetrical either way, which means you have to have a pivot cap from either end. Because if they only made them in one type of handing, and to me it seemed as if I was starting to get confused. He was saying, you know, it didn't sound like he had a pivot cap on either end. Well, of course you do, because the tip-off that you will, without ever having to see this, is that it is non-handed. They're going to give you a pivot cap in both ends because they're going to make all of these, whatever we'll call this, you know, the left-hand version or Part A and Part B, they're going to be identical, symmetrically. They're going to be identical. They'll just be symmetrical. The pivot stud, that can go in really either way. This is a typical Allen wrench. I'd like to tell you the size. .3/16, I believe. So from your point of view here, you're going to remove. You can't get that pivot cap out. Luck was working against us. If this is his hand, if you can't get to this pivot cap to remove it to then tap the pivot stud out, you got a problem. Now, let's say it was the opposite hand, and I've never done it, but I'm sure that I could. Let's remove this pivot cap on the bottom side because I flipped it over. Well, now there's a screw there. I might be able to figure out what thread that is, thread a bolt into it, and then get a handhold on something, maybe a couple of fender washers, and be able to pull that down. It would also be really helpful to, it rolled somewhere, there it is. It would also be really helpful to have the door perfectly plumb, in the sense that if the door, which the door is, hanging, it's going to put stress on the sidewall of the pivot stud and make it a little bit harder to pull or tap that out, so be mindful of that. And there is that rubber O-ring that's there. So hopefully that clarifies what is the approach with the hardware, but he must have some trim or obstacle over the top knuckle of his 180. That's preventing him from getting up here. If you can only get here and you see nothing, the blunt end of that, the closed end of the pivot stud, yeah, the floor closer, if you pull the shim out, if there is a shim, you can then drop the door down slightly. You can drop the door down. The door will go from here to being dropped down a little bit. My logic is open the door, remove these 4 screws, and hopefully it will all drop down to the point where you can then tip it out. That's a long shot, is the bottom line. Any questions on the Rixson 180 or any other Rixson product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.